Weakness breaking for the first year of Honkai starrail, this mechanic has been kinda untouched and underrated, and you would rarely see people even running break carry teams in the first place. This is because weakness breaking had some weaknesses or downsides, flaws. The first is that it was hard to break in the first place. And if you do break, the payoff usually wasn't very good and you will be outdamaged by other damage carries because the DOT debuff from breaking isn't that high. This is why when the game first came out in 1.0, Himiko was considered literally the worst 5-star unit in the game because you had to break 3 weak enemies or 1 elite or boss enemy that had hundreds and hundreds of toughness gauge. Break effect can only be utilized if the enemy even has the corresponding weakness in the first place, meaning break teams in the past would instantly be restricted to playing against enemies of the corresponding type. Meanwhile, crit and DOT carries can be used against pretty much whoever they want and the drawbacks you suffer wouldn't be as big as break carries. However, Hoyoverse has been slowly adding in more break effect scaling units, Shreddy and Runmei in 1.6, Gallagher in 2.1, Boothill in this current patch, and some other future units. They also have been adding enemies that require you to break. Anyways, these new characters are much better at using break effect, and some of them even make up for the weaknesses that weakness breaking has. For example, Boothill has a physical implant on his ultimate, allowing him to break against everyone who doesn't have a physical weakness. And just recently, Harmony Trailblazer or Harmony MC, the new free-to-play Trailblazer, makes up for another big weakness of breaking and introduces to the game this new mechanic, Super Break. Instead of getting break damage only when you break toughness, Super Break allows you to deal additional break scaling damage when you attack an enemy that is already weakness broken during Harmony MC's ultimate. I've come to realize after my Firefly video that a ton of people don't even know how the standard break works in the first place, so the first part of the break is the instantaneous damage. For different elements, you have a different multiplier, like 2 for physical and fire, and 0.5 for quantum and imaginary. You multiply this number by the level multiplier, basically the higher level, the higher the multiplier. And finally, you multiply by the max toughness multiplier, which is calculated like this. What this formula does is that it helps you to do more damage when the enemy has higher toughness, which is fair, right? Considering you take longer to break an enemy with higher toughness. So you will be rewarded with higher damage. Afterwards, this goes through the normal damage calculation jazz, defense, resistance, vulnerability, and broken multipliers. The difference is that it doesn't scale off damage boost or crit or attack percentage, none of those. This is why you can run a level 1 light cone, and as long as your character is high level with high break effect, you would still do pretty good break damage. The same applies to Super Break. Now instead of the element multiplier and a toughness multiplier, we now have a weakness depletion multiplier, or that's what I call it at least. You know how your attacks deplete a certain amount of toughness and some attacks deplete more than others? That's the weakness depletion value. Some attacks do 30, some do 60, some do 90 or 120, and there are some exceptions like a Ventrine's follow-up that does 10 for each bounce. But usually they are in multiples of 30. So the toughness multiplier is taking the weakness depletion value and dividing that by 30. So if my attack would normally deplete 60 toughness, my multiplier would be 2. Since the enemy is already in a weakness broken state when we are doing Super Break damage, the weakness depletion would normally be useless, but Super Break uses this to deal more damage. If you don't believe me, let's work backwards. Shreddy does 30,828 Super Break damage here. The enemy is level 92, has 20% quantum res, takes 30% more damage, and we have Rami's ultimate and skill, giving us 50% more weakness break efficiency, a 25% resistance penetration, and allows us to ignore 20% defense. Shreddy's skill has 60 weakness depletion, however, with Runmei it's now 90, meaning our weakness depletion multiplier should be 3. Working backwards, we get 3.000066547, so yeah, we are very close. If we work forwards, we get 30,827.31617. This is very slightly off due to the game having some rounding that I'm not very sure of, but we are only off by 0.7 damage. And since we're using this new multiplier, the enemy's toughness no longer matters. You still do good break damage even if the weaker enemies have lower toughness. So now your entire team with Super Break can deal extra damage based on the break effect for free. As you can see, my Runmei can do 10,000 damage and sometimes even up to 23,000 damage on a single basic attack. So on top of the instantaneous break damage we get, the small break damage over time, now your entire team can also smack the hell out of the enemies when they are weakness broken. Obviously you need some break effect, which is why supports like Gallagher, Runmei and HMC suddenly become pretty strong, because even if we build them with just break effect, even they can do decent damage on top of whatever else they are already doing for the team. And the cherry on top is that both Runmei and Harmony Trailblazer can delay the enemy's action when their weakness broken, allowing us to get even more Super Break damage off. Literally chef's kiss. Now all we need is Boothill and Firefly to release for the break effect meta to really come swinging in full force, because they're the first two 5-star damage carries that have break effect scaling even in their abilities. Thankfully, there's still about 3 weeks to go before Boothill drops, so I would start preparing some break effect supports if I were you. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and see you.